slide or 2 slides down. So I'm going to ask if you have questions, please put them into the chat box, and then we can curate them here, and I will address them at the end. Now, I promise as long as you guys have questions and need more information, I will stay here and answer all those questions. But let's try to keep them to the end. But you don't need to wait to the end to put the question into the chat box. So we can start gathering them. And then when I finish the presentation, as I say, I'll stay as long as folks need to get the information that they need. So let me share my screen. We practiced this. And let's see if it will work. Well, look at that. Holy cow. And now the big test is the clicker works. How about that? Great. Okay. So I promised to start off with an answer to a question that some of you may have had in your minds. I may have already caused some confusion. Teacher introduced to me as an estate planning lawyer. I describe myself as an elder law lawyer, and you may say, what in the heck is the difference? If you're familiar with your doctors, you know every cardiologist is a doctor, but not every doctor is a cardiologist. In the law business, it works sort of the same way. I am an estate planning lawyer, but I'm more of the specialist. In short, estate planning lawyers, at least if they were talking amongst themselves, might confess that they really are death planning lawyers. They help people with end-of-life things. I like to think of myself as a life planning lawyer. We focus on the decade or 2 or 3 before end of life, or maybe even an entire lifetime if our client is a child with a disability. So I'm really a disability lawyer. I'm really an asset protection lawyer. I try to help sort of make sure that people get the benefits they're entitled to receive, and that they don't lose all of their family wealth because of some accident or health problem. We are at the Legacy Elder Law Center a bit unusual in terms of law firms, not only because of our focus on the elder law, but we also have an affiliate company called GuideWise that's on the care side of things. We call GuideWise the Family Caregiver Support Network. They don't practice law. I don't practice medicine or social work, but where we may be working on plans to help people pay for the care that they may need or their parents may need, GuideWise is helping them find the right place to live with dignity and independence within the resources that we're able to pull together. And frankly, a lot of the support, maybe even more than half of the support, is provided to family caregivers who are finding themselves in a situation that Americans, the people in the world, have just never seen before. Not an unusual thing for me to hear. Boy, my mom has had a problem, or my mom is declining with Alzheimer's. My husband is complaining that we haven't had a date in 3 months. My youngest son is applying to college, and my boss has this fantasy that I'm actually going to show up to work every day, and yet I find myself having to go visit mom 2 or 3 days or sleep over there or whatever. Most of our lives were at 100% capacity before that emergency happens. How do we, deal with it? This is not an unusual thing. I tell people this way in my own family. I grew up in the 1960s. My mom had a hard and fast rule, and well, she had lots of rules, but one of those was everybody ate dinner together when dad came home from work, and there was no TV, and there certainly weren't cell phones involved. And we were required to engage in this thing called conversation, where the wisdom of the ages was imparted to us by mom and dad. And I remember talking about, should I go to college? Should I join the military? Vietnam was going on at the time. Should I get married? I don't remember a single conversation about long-term care. And we could talk for hours about what's happening in our diet and the world changing and so on. But the truth of the matter is, for most of us, just one generation up, we pretty much could expect that our parents or grandparents got sick, they died, and life went back to normal. And so in my family, I have 4 grandparents, like every other human. Between 1947 and 1982, all of them passed away. Both men smoked cigarettes, had heart attacks, and died before they left the hospital. In 1970, my father's mother was diagnosed with cancer. So she came to live with us, my mom, who didn't work, pretty typical in that era, even in Northern Virginia. She became primary caregiver. I got moved to the basement. My grandmother took over my bedroom. My mom took care of my grandmother for 4 months until she passed away and life went back to normal. Then 12 years later, my mother's mother was diagnosed with cancer. I got moved back to the basement. She came to live with us. My mom became her caregiver. All four grandparents, a grand total of 10 months of long term care. So it's not surprising that a lot of wisdom was passed down from generation to generation. It was just a part of life and what you dealt with. And we sort of culturally had built in with single earner families somebody who was already used to being that family support role, and that's really not so common anymore. So we get people with questions saying, boy, how come I don't instinctively know? I know more about changing a tire than how do I help mom, or how do I plan for these things. So we like to have a holistic approach because understanding where people are in their journeys is very helpful for us to make sure that we plan for the resources that people need as they go through that journey. So uh, that's an explanation of who I am and why I'm here. I'll tell you a little more later about personally why I have a passion for this area of the law. But I want to turn the tables a little bit and ask what you made you a long list of people joined literally from all over the country for this presentation today. Put it kind of bluntly, why in the world would you voluntarily subject yourself to a lawyer's speech when you could be doing something else undoubtedly more pleasant tonight? My guess is that it's not just worries, but you're here because there's somebody you love. It might be a spouse, it might be a parent, it might be a kid. I'm not sure who it is, but someone that you're hoping that you'll pick up something today that will help support your family, help that loved one, and maybe help you help that loved one. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what we try to do is help people with the nuts and bolts so that they can do what they do best, which is love. Not be worried about doing Google searches or making phone call after phone call, and help them construct a customized solution for their family. What all of us are facing, I call the perfect storm. There are things that are happening in the last 20 years that have literally never happened in the history of mankind before. Some of these things you will probably recognize. Um, Most of what I'm going to talk about tonight, believe it or not, is not legal technical things. It's real world things like economics. Not, I promise it's not graduate school or even college economics. It's like middle school economics. So what did you learn about at least the capitalist system in middle school? Supply and demand, right? When the need for something goes up, the price goes up. When the supply of things increases, then the price goes down. So in the world of elder care, what's driving demand? It's the number of seniors, right? Okay, so we can be a little interactive. Is that number going up or going down? Well, we all know that that number is going way up. It's the fastest growing segment of the population in the country, and certainly here in Northern Virginia. Okay, so since we um, have been, existing on the planet, how have humans taken care of their seniors? If that's our demand, what's our supply of care? Well, historically, that's our kids, like my mom or my grandmother's. How's that number doing? Is it keeping up? No, the number of kids is way down. In fact, we set a new record 2 years ago. We don't have last year's number yet, 1.75. We were looking at something. My wife's daughter is in Africa working for the State Department. I think the birth rate there is 5.3, I think. 5.3 children per woman. America's 1.75. We're not even replacing ourselves anymore. And just a generation before, it was 4 or 3, and it's been coming down. And then when you consider that most of those kids are working, that's way up. It's very rare to find a stay-at-home anymore, a stay-at-home mom anymore. Last one I met was actually a stay-at-home dad. They do exist, but they're pretty much unicorns. So we have an ever shrinking population of kids relative to the number of seniors, and the time that they have to be able to apply to this new responsibility makes it worse. So what happens then when our demand is going up and our supply is going down? Everybody's paying for it through costs. So there's no surprise that expenses are climbing. The doctors are doing their part. Traditional causes of death are way down. Number one killer of adults in America is heart disease, actually down 30% in the first 10 years of this decade. That's pretty amazing. Does that mean everybody's in good shape and we can just relax? Unfortunately, no. During that same period, death from things like Alzheimer's and other cognitive declines is dramatically increasing 40% in that same 10-year period. And dealing with cognitive decline is a more and more common issue these days. If you've ever had to deal with someone in your family, you know that it's terrible and devastating to entire families, but it is ultimately terminal, but it takes a long time, for that to happen. So these days of 6 months or 10 months of care for a pair of parents is not something that we're seeing much anymore. We're seeing much longer periods of time. So the government tells us that today, if you're 65 years old, the probability that you're going to need long-term care is 70%. That's the last statistic we have. I sometimes say to people, what's most interesting about this slide to me is that the last number the government gave us, that number was 25%. That was in the year 2000. This number is from 2014. So between 2000 and 2014, we went from 25% likelihood that you're going to need long-term care to 70. I don't know what the number is now, but I'm quite sure it's on the north side of 70% and not lower. So let's talk about the cost a little bit. Back in 2007, that's about the time I focused my practice exclusively on elder law. If you had a loved one who needed to go to a nursing home, you might pay, the average in Northern Virginia was about $214 a day, a nice hotel. Not cheap, but if you paid for that out of pocket for an entire year, out of pocket, it would cost less than $80,000. Again, I'm not saying that's a small amount of money, but that may not be a number that's ruinous for a family, especially if the need was 6 months or 9 months. Now, $550 a day is a much more common number. That's over $200,000 a year. And when you consider that the government statistics are that the average woman who needs long-term care needs it for 3 years and 7 months, multiply that 200 by 3.7, we're talking about a number that could very well be devastating to finances. It's not just eggs, but long-term care has gone up too. Even if we don't account for inflation that's higher than we've had in the rest of the economy in the last year, in 10 years, they tell us we should expect to pay almost $1,100 for one day in a nursing home. That's about $400,000. I hate to say it, but this is actually the good news. I have yet to have a client come to me and say, Rory, can you help me go to a nursing home? None of my clients want to go to a nursing home. What do we all want to do? We know we're going to get older. We want to age in place. We even have a phrase for it. Unfortunately, care at home is way more expensive. Back to economics. There's economies of scale at the nursing home. It may cost $400,000 a year in 10 years when you've got multiple caregivers and a nurse for 12 people. But if it's one-on-one at home, it's going to be more expensive, right? So right now, $650 a day is pretty typical. We have people paying more than $35 an hour when they come in for assistance. So today, that's $290,000 a year. 10 years, they tell us at that's at $35 an hour. That's $840 a day, $300,000 a year. In 10 years, you could be looking at more than $500,000 for a single year of care at home. I appreciate that when I run through these numbers, it's kind of like the national debt. It's incomprehensible, right? You can kind of get your head around the fact that a new SUV could cost $50,000 or $75,000. It's just really crazy expensive. And how do you get your head around multiple years of $600,000 a year? Literally, the truth is 99% of the people on the planet don't earn $600,000 in their entire lifetime, much less save it several times over for care. And I think this is one reason why people have worries and concerns, is because they're not even sure how to approach the problem. But there is good news. Um, Currently, the government tells us that 50% of couples and 70% of individuals are impoverished in 1 year if somebody needs long-term care. It's not because people are irresponsible. I think it's actually because they are responsible. They meet their life's obligations. They make sure their kids don't incur $300,000 of student loan debt. Fix it. None of us has a memo from God when we're going to have the stroke or the car accident or the heart attack or the dementia diagnosis. We all think we know the bill for the new roof is due in 2 weeks, but maybe we have more time to put more in savings. And so we do save, but in retrospect, it turns out we may not be saving as much as we need to meet that goal. One way people have addressed that in the past is by buying private long-term care insurance. I'm not a salesman, but if you guys were, when I said I think your industry is in collapse, you'd all be nodding your head in agreement with me. Again, it's not because they're not smart people. They're very, very smart people. Problem is the perfect storm is happening to them as well. And people are outliving their policies. The only way for them to keep up is by raising premiums. And when people finally realize that they're getting a set amount for a set period of time, when the care need is getting longer and higher, it's only a tool. It's not a solution to the problem. As a consequence, we've gone from 200 companies selling long-term care insurance to 5 in Virginia now. If that's not stunning enough, these are some numbers I pulled from Wall Street Journal recently. In 2002, sort of at the heyday of the long-term care insurance industry, Americans bought almost 1 million policies, about 800,000 policies that year. In 2019, we bought less than 30,000. That's why there are only 5 companies left. It's not the other way around. They are not there selling because there's nobody there to buy them, because people aren't finding value in the policy. I mean, I'm not saying there's no value, it's just it's not a solution. If you bought a policy in 1990 that had lifetime coverage, then that might be a good deal, but there are no lifetime coverage policies anymore. 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. I think 5 is the longest I've seen in a couple of years. Last thing in this perfect storm that some people read about or have seen happen is something called filial responsibility. If that phrase doesn't sound familiar to you, I'm not surprised. But you all know its cousin, the legal principle of child support. We all have an obligation to raise our children to adulthood, right? That's just good parenting. The law says you should do what parents do, raise your kids. Well, what most people don't know is that coin has a flip side, that we as kids have an obligation to pay for our parents' long-term care. And so in Virginia, we call that the filial responsibility statute. It's been on our books for about 100 years. And as a consequence, children are now being sued to pay for the cost of their parents' care. There is a limit. It's only 5 years, but at $200,000 or $300,000 a year, I know my 29-year-old welder son wouldn't have a problem paying for my long-term care. So if we stick with this concept of the perfect storm, let's extend that metaphor a little bit longer. Let's say you were on, it's hurricane season now. Let's say, and Helena last week, we're still dealing with the remnant, Helene, sorry. We're still dealing with the remnants of that. So I'd like you to imagine last week you were on a boat in the Atlantic, and unbeknownst to the unexpected hurricane comes up. The sky turns dark, the waves are crashing over the bow of the ship. What is it that you would want most in the world? What would be your greatest wish? Other than a submarine, my guess is what you'd really want is not the Google machine so that you could do a research as to how do I survive a hurricane in a sailboat. What you'd probably want is somebody standing next to you who had done it before, who had some experience. In a nutshell, that's what elder law attorneys do. It may be the first time for you and your family to go through it, but this is what we do all the time. So conquering the storm and protecting your family is really about not having to reinvent the wheel yourself, but having somebody who can guide you through it. This gives you a chance to look at a couple of things about me, which I'm just going to hit real fast. And my firm, we're actually quite large for an elder law firm. I've lost count whether we have it's between 20 and 25 employees in the firm. I've been practicing now 37 years. I'm in my 38th year. My partner, I'm very proud to say that my partner and I are two of only four qualified master counselors in trusted estates in the state of Virginia. That's an accolade or award granted by the Virginia Law Foundation. I'm the author of a book you have not seen at Costco. I wish I could get them to sell it for me, called the Family Estate Planning and Elder Law Guide. I'm not sure that that gives you much insight or not. There are a couple of professional references that might be meaningful to you. There's an organization that does interviews and surveys of professional lawyers and judges about their peers. They rate all of us on a scale of legal ability and ethics. Their highest rating is so nobody gets a D or an F. It's the thumper theory. They don't say anything bad about anybody. So if your peers don't think you're at least good and you merit a C, you don't get a rating. But if you're good, you get a C. If you're excellent, you get a B. A is for preeminent. And then with ethics, they give you a V for very ethical. If you're not rated very ethical, you don't get a rating either. So I'm pleased to say that my peers have rated our firm and me a V preeminent since 2000. Very proud of that because you hope that those are the folks who know. There's another organization called AVO that you might be familiar with. It's more client centric. If you've had an experience with a lawyer recently because of a speeding ticket or a real estate closing, you can go on to AVO and write a review and tell the world what you think. They'll aggregate those and they give us ratings on a scale of up to 10. They give their highest rating, they call it superb, which sounds like a dessert to me, but I'll take it as long as I can remember they've rated us highly. Also professionally, the organization of lawyers who focus on special needs for children and elder law is called the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. I recently the chairman of our membership and communications committee, meaning all the materials on the Virginia Academy's website about this stuff was written by me. I'm currently the vice president of the organization and slated to be president next year. Okay, now this may surprise you after having gone through my resume, but I don't really think any of these things are particularly compelling reason for you to talk to us about how to help your family. I'm not saying that experience and ethics aren't important. They're really critical. What I think differentiates my team's ability to help you is the fact that we have walked this journey personally, not just professionally hundreds of times, but personally. So real fast, I wanted to introduce you to what created my passion or a part of it. This is a picture of my mom, the most courageous woman I've ever known. This is a picture I took of her the day that she finally had to move into a nursing home 12 years into her 14-year struggle with Parkinson's disease. We were able to keep her at home for 12 of those years, though. Finally, her doctor said, really, to be fair to her, she needed to go to a facility because she needed more than one caregiver around the clock. She was essentially bedridden at the time. Like a lot of my clients, my mom wasn't very much focused about herself. Her number one priority was this guy, my dad. That's a picture I took of him the same day. You see the cubby holes in the background? That's the day he moved into memory care on his 11-year journey with Alzheimer's. Okay, so remember what I said about their parents? 10 months between 1947 and 1982. For my brothers and sisters, 25 years. And that's just one generation. And that's not that unusual a situation. I am sure you know people who are in similar situations. Um, I could tell you more about Dad. He was a wonderful, fascinating person, but he is a true example of what we're been talking about tonight, love. Even when he didn't remember who I was anymore, he still knew his job was to get up, take a shower, get dressed, and go downstairs and supervise those nurses who were taking care of my mom. They didn't so much appreciate the help, but he didn't care because that's the way the world worked. Um, I want to also introduce you to my oldest son, who I mentioned a second ago. The picture on the left is a photo that I took of him when he was 3 months old. That was before he could walk and before we knew he had something called autism. Picture on the right might give you a hint, wearing a tuxedo. When he was 22, he was finally able to graduate from high school, something for many years we did not think was even a remote possibility. I'm as proud as I possibly can be of him. We recently got him moving out on his own. He's been accepted into the Steamfitters Union apprenticeship program. He's learning to be a welder. He just started his last year. It's perfect for him because he gets his instructions, he pulls down the mask, he doesn't have to interact with anybody, he gets to be creative and work with his hands. He cannot ask for a job, they just call him and say, you have an assignment. He's been told to expect that when he graduates next May, he'll probably command an annual salary of 6 figures for a kid who didn't go to college. I'm very proud of what he's accomplished. That's Justin on the left. On the right is my younger son, Scott. I have two. That's Scotty. I'm very proud of him as well. Where he was lost. That's Scotty wearing his costume for playing the role of, he's an opera singer, playing the role of Don Giovanni in Prague at the theater where Mozart debuted Don Giovanni. That's pretty cool to fly to Prague. I asked Liz to marry me when we were there.
Technical issue.
Sure.
I can still see.
You're still seeing?
I
Yeah,
can
so
still
am I,
see
so
Scotty and Justin.
I don't know if it's just here.
All right, let me figure out.
Don't leave.
Yeah, don't end the meeting for all.
There we go. You got it.
Look at that.
Okay.
Well, that's not, that's too much me, not enough picture, but it'll work. Look at you. Applause. The reason Scotty's here is because even though he's 26, he's already blind in one eye because of an autoimmune disorder. And it's attacking his right eye. And I can tell you his personal story and how courageous I think he is. But at the same time, I'm dealing with mom and Parkinson's disease, my dad with Alzheimer's. My sister had a 5-year struggle with colon cancer before she died. And then these are my two kids. I get that life gets full and that you need some help and some information that's not right there. When Justin was born, I can remember saying to my wife at the time, I'm a lawyer and I don't know what to do. What does that single mom with two kids do? How do you even figure out where do you find the resources? So I am passionate about this not only professionally, but because I realized that I need to pay forward a little bit to the things that I got from people who helped me as I was going through that journey with my family. So what I want to do with the rest of the presentation now is talk about a couple of the programs we use to help people pay for care so they don't have to empty their retirement accounts and their life savings. I'm going to very quickly talk about a program that I have a lot more information on, but because it is what the government calls a defined benefit program, it has a limited benefit. I'm going to focus on another program that's much more powerful later, but I do want to pay a little bit of attention to a program called VA Aid and Attendance. It is a program that's like the GI Bill. It's a thank you to wartime veterans and their spouses who served during a period of wartime. Okay, and it is, let's click through. The reason we love it is because it's tax-free cash that families can use to help support people who need care. It is a defined benefit. They call it a pension paid on a monthly basis. If I have a veteran married to a veteran, it's about $44,000 a year of help, or about $3,700 a month. This is where my parents started. My dad was a Marine in World War II, in the occupation force in Japan. Came back, met my mom after the war was over, and we brought them in at the then current value, what's now about $2,700 or $33,000 a year. If in fact, my father survived my mother. She died first, so his benefit alone is about $2,300 this year, 28,000, almost $28,000 a year. But here, watch this. This is cool. If my mother had survived my father, even though she never wore a uniform a day in her life, she would have been entitled to a veteran benefit because of my dad's service. To be clear, there's one benefit per vet. It belongs to the vet. If the vet dies and the spouse has been married for at least a year, then that spouse gets that benefit. And it's a little more than half of the couple benefit. So again, nobody's getting rich on these. But the main purpose of the program is to make sure families are recovering money that they would otherwise be spending on food and the roof over their head. It's not intended to pay for the nursing home in Manhattan. It's intended to make sure people aren't losing their income due to a long-term care need. So for some folks, my dad used his at that assisted living facility in that memory care unit. To be sure, his cost was well above $2,300 a month, but it meant that we could stretch his individual resources a whole lot farther because I had an extra $27,000 to apply to that bill for the year, right? If there's a dependent in the family, they'll actually put a few $100s extra on as well. Okay, so enough about that. What about the other program? This is the most powerful tool that we use. And this is the one that we go to much of the time, especially in the Washington, D.C. area. We practice in Maryland, Virginia, and D.C., where the costs are way higher than that VA benefit. Plus, I have many, many clients who just didn't serve during wartime or are not veterans, right? So the program that I'm going to talk about next is something called ABD Medicaid, which is a long-term care insurance program that I'm sure everybody in this room and probably everyone on the videotape absolutely is entitled to as a condition of being a U.S. citizen. It also applies to people who have green cards, who are entitled to Social Security. But if you're an American citizen, you don't even need to be a Social Security recipient to be entitled to this program. I'm pausing for a little bit on this slide, even though I need to move through them pretty quickly, because I do know from experience that when I start talking to folks about a program that has the word Medicaid in it, I see some people shiver or worry, or they want to pack up their stuff and leave because they think I'm about to start talking about a welfare program. I am not. If you have that in your mind, you're thinking of Medicaid health insurance, which is a welfare program for people on food stamps, for example. This program is designed to go along with other senior benefits, Social Security and Medicare, and it is absolutely not a welfare program. So I tell people that one of the things I need to do is unlearn you some of the things that you think you know, clear your brain out so I can fill it up with the truth. There are a lot of myths that I want to make sure I dispel. The first is that the ABD, which stands, by the way, for aged, blind, and disabled. It's people who need help to be safe and to function with the daily activities of daily life, what we call ADLs. You could be on welfare and get this, but you don't have to be. Most of my clients are very, very far away. They have money that they want to protect, and we're actually allowed to do it. Those three initials, ABD, are the only thing that's separated from what you think of as the Medicaid health insurance program. That health insurance program is just Medicaid health insurance. This is specifically a long-term care benefit. I hear people say, well, I've read somewhere that I can. I get it, even though I may be a person of some means, but I have to give away all my assets and penniless. When I'm broke and they're about to put me under a bridge to, to live in a tent, that's when I can get some help. Not the case. They'll say, oh, yeah, I read an article in the Wall Street Journal. You can hire a fancy lawyer. He can shelter assets for your family, but you've got to give up control, which is the same as being penniless, not really interested in giving up control of my assets. I think the worst myth that I hear is you have to go to a nursing home to receive the benefit. People will usually tell me that they're afraid they're going to have to go to a government nursing home that's somewhere near Roanoke. All of these things are myths. They're not true. They're not even close to true. Here's the truth. ABD is one of the three great senior benefits. The way I try to describe it to people easily is think of a three-legged stool that we have designed to support people in their senior years. First leg is Social Security. Is Social Security a welfare program? You guys who are here? No. You pay for it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, or civil service if you work for the government. Okay. How about Medicare? That's the second leg. That's health insurance. You're 68, you have a heart attack, you go to the hospital. When this started happening in the late 50s, they realized that people were being ruined by one hospital bill. So we created Medicare to provide health insurance for seniors. Is that a welfare program? Oh, you paid into that too, right? Well, there's a two-legged stool, doesn't stay up very well, does it? I got the roof over my head. I've got the food. Social Security's helping me there. I survived my fall or my auto accident. Medicare paid for my doctor's bills, but now I'm on a walker because of the accident. Or now I need long-term care to stay safe. With these costs that we've been talking about, that stool's going to fall right over. So at the same time we established Medicare, we established the ABD long-term care insurance program. You just don't know about it because they didn't ask you to enroll. You don't enroll until you have a long-term care need, but they have been taxing you for this since 1965. Every dollar you have put into Medicare, you have put an equal dollar into this long-term care insurance policy, and I bet you don't even know it. And every single pay period, your boss matched not only your Social Security, but your Medicare and your ABD benefit. It is not a welfare program. You paid for it. I like it because unlike the VA program, it's unlimited. Okay, I'm a lawyer, my lips are moving. What does unlimited mean? I'll give you a couple examples. If your mom is in that nursing home that I was talking about in Manhattan and it's $30,000 a month for somebody to privately pay there, they will pay every dollar for your mom to be that's necessary for her to be in that facility. They're not going to pay $30,000. They're going to pay the Medicaid rate, but your mom is allowed to be there and they sign up voluntarily to take that discounted rate. Why? Economics, because it means they never have an empty bed. It's the same reason hotels give a discount to the carpenters union because they fill up the hotel and they make more money in the long run. Another way, Liz's brother broke his neck in a diving accident when he was in his 20s. He's been quadriplegic since then. If you had a relative in your family who needed long-term care for 60 years, ABD Medicaid would pay every penny of every month for 60 years, for the rest of that person's life. It never expires. What I absolutely think is the best is that 75% of the people who use this program do not use it to pay for nursing homes. They use it to stay at home, which is exactly what my clients want. I want to hire and fire my own caregivers and have them come to my house. And that's what this program does. It certainly does cover the nursing home, but its most popular benefit is to pay for private caregivers hired by families to bring that care into home. So people become incredulous and they'll say, why would they let me keep my life savings? Why would they let me keep $2 or $3 billion and pay for my care? Well, if you have that mindset, it's probably because you think the policy is about poverty or welfare. We want to keep people from living under the bridge. And while that is true, it isn't the reason that motivated them to create this policy. What put ABD Medicaid on the books was a policy about avoiding family impoverishment. I'm just going to tie a couple of slides together real quick. You remember that one that said that 70% of single people who need long-term care are impoverished in 1 year? Okay. Do they get a promise that they're going to die in 1 year? No, they don't. Who pays if you haven't made other arrangements after mom or dad is broke? Love, family. Wives will go broke for husbands, husbands will go broke for wives, children will go broke for parents. Now let's talk about welfare. Dad's in the nursing home, mom's on welfare because she went broke for him, and the kids have been paying. And instead of saving for their own retirement or their care, they're now on food stamps because they've had to quit their job to help take care of it. What was happening was we were passing impoverishment down from generation to generation. And so the program was put in place not to make people poor, but to make sure they never became poor in the first place. So some folks, as I say, can be skeptical. This is the one law I'm actually going to quote tonight. And this is something I'm taking right out of Virginia's Medicaid manual. It's not in the footnotes, buried somewhere. In the general introduction for the rules dealing with married couples, I'm taking one out of there. There's also another rule for single people. But this is their language about I didn't invent this. All I added was some colors. The government says the ABD Medicaid program rules are intended to prevent the impoverishment of a spouse, the well spouse, who's living in the community when the other spouse needs care, whether that's at home or nursing home. If you read that carefully, you don't have to have gone to Harvard Law School to read. It doesn't have anything to do with the man who had the heart attack. The purpose of the program is protecting his wife, who is not in the nursing home, because they get it just like we do. The wife will go broke, and now we have people on welfare when that family's broke. Kind of like them giving you the toaster at the bank to open an account with $10,000. They don't give you a toaster because they like you. They give you a toaster because it's a good deal. They spend money on toasters, but they get something in return. So you can ask the question, that's an interesting theory, Rory. Has it actually worked? Well, let's play that out. 1959, the government asked, let's do some research. They found that the number of seniors in the country at that time was about 15.5 million people over the age of 65. So those of you who are here and not on mute, back in 1960, what do you think the poverty rate was among seniors in America? Pick a percentage. What do you think? 1%, 90%, 50%? I'll put you out of your misery. 20, 35%. More than a third. Why? Because somebody had to go to the hospital. And even back then, if it was $5,000, that was crazy. You know, the average income in America in 1970 was $10,000 a year, right? So the bills are horrible now, but they were horrible then, too. So what they said was, we've got to finish building that stool. They started with Social Security in the 30s, and then in the 60s, we added Medicare and we added Medicaid. Both of them came into law at the same time in 1965. Okay, so now we can look and we can see, did it work? Well, 2019, we had 56 million seniors in America. Actually, I think that's I think that's a mistake. I think that's the 2023 number. Do you think the programs work or not? Given everything you know about cost of care, how long people are living, do you think the percentage of seniors living in poverty is, let's just go higher or lower? Higher than the old 35% or lower?
Higher.
It's lower. It wouldn't be much of a presentation if
It's not working.
it's not working. No, it's actually been a hugely successful program. If you look at those actual numbers, there are barely more people in poverty, count total numbers, than there were in 1959, even though we've gone from 15 million to 55 million seniors. It's been extraordinarily useful and powerful program. So, why is that slide there? I spent some time trying to look for, so I'm gonna go here. I think this is, I
You looked up.
I know, but I went through and I reviewed. I must have inadvertently suppressed a couple of slides, but this will help me keep up with the speed. So let me tell you a story about some clients of mine, and you've already seen a couple of the answers. I use the name Bob and Jean. That's Liz's parents' name. That's not her family. But the case is a real case from our office. Bob was a farmer, cattle farmer. He had a stroke. They literally found him in the field. Unfortunately, it was a devastating physical stroke. Good news, bad news, he was very sharp. He was cognitive, aware of everything that was going on, but physically totally disabled. There was no chance he was going to be able to come home. At the time they had the stroke, they had a farm worth $3.8 million. They had a beach house in the Outer Banks of North Carolina worth $850,000. They had about $250,000 in antiques and jewelry, $150,000 in the bank. Okay. And to be honest, they had a little bit of debt. It was a working farm. They had a line of credit with the bank. When the cows were growing, they would borrow money, feed themselves, feed the cows. When the cows would go to slaughter, they would pay off the loan, put a little money away, and this was the cycle of the farm. So on the day Bob had his stroke, they had borrowed about $125,000 on a $300,000 loan. And the last thing I want you to know about their fact pattern, this is what the lawyers would say in law school, is that Jean was a self-admitted control freak. She said, and it's not very politically correct, but I feel like I can say it because it's her words. She said, Rory, I love my son. I trust him implicitly, but that woman he married is not getting anywhere near my money. If you have a plan for me, I have to be in charge. That's a requirement. I have to be in control of everything. Okay, so there's supposed to be a question, can Jean get this unlimited long-term care benefit for Bob? And I mean reasonably promptly, not in 5 or 10 years. You've already seen the slide. We'll avoid the drum roll. Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, Jean didn't even pay for one single day of long-term care. We had ABD paying the day he moved from rehab into the nursing home. I wish he didn't have to stay in nursing care, but that's up to his doctors and God, not me. That's the reality. The truth of the matter is the way the plan is designed, if Jean has a problem, she has a car accident in 6 years, we'll be able to cover her as well. Why? Because we have a policy that protects kids, just like we have a policy that protects spouses. So now to the slide that I did have in here. Here are the things that Jean's saying. I'm going to look for the person next to me in the hurricane who can help. The first on the list is that Bob is at the nursing home she chose, and that might sound surprising to you, but if you have ever had anybody in care, just like location is the rule in nursing homes. Proximity to a loved one is the most important thing. I don't care where the doctor or how many nurses on staff. Those sons of guns won't know when I'm coming by, and if there are 2 men, and it depends, Bob's going to be changed first every single time. Because I might come by at breakfast time, middle of the afternoon, 10 o'clock when they're putting everybody to bed. I will make sure that he gets good care. We were able to help her choose exactly the facility. She chose against a couple of facilities that may have had higher ratings in order to have one that was 10 minutes from home, so that she could drop by on a whim and keep them on their toes. This is what their assets look like afterwards. We still have the family farm. It's preserved. Jean still lives there, as a matter of fact. The beach house is still still owned by them, still being rented, generating income. They reserve 1 month a year for the family to use it. Otherwise, it's a good investment for the family. They still have, well, they don't have 150. They have pretty much $150,000. And all of her jewelry and antiques paid for Bob's care. I have to admit, they still have $125,000 in debt, but they had that debt before they came to me. I didn't create the debt. The reason I put this in here is sometimes people, when they try to solve this problem and they have that big farm, they'll go and put, have you ever heard of a reverse mortgage? Okay, and they suck the equity out of the farm, which depletes the family to just turn that. We did not do that. In fact, the point I would like to point out is financially, they're not far off from where they were the day before Bob had a stroke because they still have a farm producing cows that can pay the $125,000 in debt. Most exciting, the death grip on everything. She is the only one who decides how many cows go to the abattoir. Whether they buy Apple or Microsoft or which month they take for the family at the vacation house. No one else participates. On a committee, she is solely the one person on the planet who makes these decisions for the family. Pretty cool for her. So now I get to see these slides again. Okay, so we call this, these strategies that we put together our SMART plan. It may seem like there are a lot of things that are incomprehensible and how do you get them? This is one of the things that make number and oh my God, that's complicated. I'm just going to pray that I don't ever need long-term care. The truth of the matter is there are 5 things that I need to know in order to make a plan for people. Do I have a spouse? Do I have a veteran? What kind of assets do they own? Do they own a house? And how much time? Do I need a plan today? Or am I planning proactively, approaching retirement and wants to make sure they've got this covered? Why? Because I have different strategies that I use for each of those elements. So when we applied this for Jean, and please don't these down, this used. Because it's not about poverty, Jean is allowed to live in the house that they lived in because they know that if we make her sell her house to use some of the, even if it's just some of the equity to pay for Bob, we're going to be putting her on the path to poverty, right? They all know, just like the rest of it, it's better to own a single family house than a townhouse. A townhouse is a better investment than a condo. Condo is a better investment than paying rent, and paying rent is better than, do I need to restart?
I think we lost your
My share?
share, yeah.
Let's try again. How's that?
Yep, you're back.
Good. Is better than the. You would probably say, well, there's a rule of reason about how fancy the house can be or how big the house is. No, there is no rule. It could be Mar-a-Lago. It could be a $10 million house. It's not about poverty. It's about keeping families from being put on the path to poverty. Because Jean's house was on the farm, I'm allowed to protect the entire farm and therefore the business on it. There are other real estate rules that we use to shelter the condo or the single family house on the beach in the Outer Banks. And as I said, Jean is the one who's in charge of that operation and makes all of those decisions. Because it's not about poverty, Jean is allowed to have a certain amount of money in her checking account, in her own name. Oh, she could have it in $100 bills on this table in this conference room. That number this year is $154,000. In addition, she's allowed to have a vehicle of any value. Okay, she happens to drive a Lexus. When I get pushback from people saying, no, I've read about it, it's welfare, I'm a giver, not a taker, I don't want to hear about this. I say, Jean lives in a house worth $3.8 million, drives a Lexus, and has $150,000 in her checking account. She doesn't keep it in her checking account. Is that poverty? It is not. She is doing what the government wants, which is protect her family over the long haul. Here's how it really works. This is where people get off. They said, but I've read somewhere that you can't have more than $2,000 in assets. to get this benefit. And that's wrong. The rule is you can't have more than $2,000 of something called countable resources. You think that means assets. It's not. Just like when you do your taxes, there's a big difference between your expenses and your deductions, right? Big difference. In my world, we deal with the definitions. You can have $40 billion of assets, but you can only have $2,000 of countable resources. Planning for Gene involved making sure that the $5 million of assets that Bob owned were handled in such a way that they no longer met the definition of countable resources. That's really what we do. That's shorthand for saying those assets are protected so that no nursing home or credit card company can sue Bob and take the assets away, right? Because that puts us on an accelerated path for impoverishment. In the long run, what helped this family out is that we put everything into something called an asset protection trust. Gene is the only trustee of that trust. That's where the farm is, for example. And now we've got the money in there as well, so that if she has a health problem in the future, everything that's in one of these specially constructed trusts is by definition not a countable resource. That's how simple it can be, especially if you're planning again. These are not typical revocable living trusts, which many of you may have. Those are very useful tools. Virtually all of my clients get those. But if you have assets in a revocable living trust and you get sued, they can take every single penny. It's not an asset protection trust. These are trusts that are much more sophisticated, that are designed to keep creditors at bay. That's the deal for the government. If you shelter your assets so that your family is protected, we'll give you the toaster. It's all worth a lot more than a toaster. We'll pay for your long-term care. Everybody following? Okay, so wrapping up, that list is pretty close. She's incredulous. She doesn't think I'll make it. I get to. They had a prayer. I get a minute.
You did that great.
It was good for her. All right. So if you don't want to burn through your assets and your life savings, you don't want to continue paying on a ever increasing premium rate for a long-term care insurance policy. What did you lose me?
Yeah.
See you later.
That's not bad. I can see me.
He's been gone for a while.
Yeah, we're not sure why.
There you are.
Here I am. Excellent. Sorry, you can see me again. And let me take that to away. If you don't want to be a burden on your children or other family members because they have to take you into their guest room or build an apartment in the basement or pay for your bills, then the truth is you got a problem. This perfect storm that we've been talking about, it's not a question of is there going to be one. The storm is there. The only question is it going to hit our part of the beach, right? And the way the trends are going, it's becoming an ever increasing probability that hurricane is going to hit our part of the shore. But what if you had a guarantee you didn't have to eat tuna fish 3 meals a day, but you could save every possible penny against a catastrophe in the future, and instead you had a guarantee that you could use every dollar that you saved for retirement for your retirement? What if you had a guarantee that you wouldn't be sent to the lowest cost nursing home in the state? And by the way, hospitals have the right to do that without your consent. They can send you anywhere that has an open bed. COVID, they were sending people across state lines. But instead, you had a guarantee that you could stay in your house until your doctor said it's not safe anymore. What if you had a guarantee your kids wouldn't have to build that apartment for you or pay your bills, and instead you knew that you could personally, or the family members you pick, could hire and fire the caregivers that come into your house? What if you had a guarantee you wouldn't have to keep paying premiums on a policy in an industry that's getting smaller and smaller and smaller? And instead you knew you had a guarantee, a lifetime guarantee, that would provide coverage for these kinds of costs. And finally, what if you had a guarantee that you wouldn't miss the opportunity to plan for a kid who may be injured, like Liz's brother? I broke my neck in a car accident when I was 25. Nobody saw that coming. My parents didn't have a plan. in their plan that if I had become paralyzed, that I would, but if you inherit more than $2,000, that's more than $2,000 of accountable resources, and somebody who is in the worst position of their life now finds out that they got a modest inheritance, but it's not enough to take care of them for life. What if you had a guarantee that you could make sure that a child or a grandchild's legacy was in fact protected so that they could benefit from it, keep the value of that inheritance, but not lose their own benefit? Well, that's what we do. So in wrapping up, this is the only part where I get to down to the nitty gritty. What does this mean in terms of how do I hire a professional, to do this? So for folks who come to us who are interested in this kind of service, more than just traditional estate planning, I want to avoid probate. I want to make sure I have a power of attorney. We do that too, but you're concerned about long-term care, either because we've got a parent in a crisis today, we need help tomorrow, or we want to help mom and dad plan ahead for when they're in their 80s and they're healthy now in their 70s, or for clients themselves who are approaching retirement and they just want to get their stuff together. We have 3 levels of service. The first one, I should say, everything that we do at that level includes the things that you probably think of as being in a traditional estate plan. Advanced medical directives of healthcare, powers of attorney, who talks to the doctors and tells the doctors what to do if you're not able to communicate. A durable financial power of attorney, who has the authority to talk to Social Security or to the 401k plan to, get those benefits flowing. Last wills and testaments, who takes care of who's guardian for minor children, who's going to be in charge of your financial affairs, where do things go that are in your own name when you die. The revocable living trust, which is a great tool for avoiding the probate process, and I do it, and I'm telling you, it's expensive and it's cumbersome, and it takes a long time. And you can absolutely avoid the probate process if you have done your planning through something called a revocable living trust. But it's also more powerful than that. In a world where powers of attorney, or anybody tried to use a power of attorney recently for someone, thanks, Liz took literally 3 days off work to get her brother's power of attorney accepted by 3 or 4 different institutions. They hate them. Why? Identity theft. Fastest growing crime in the country. And when a stranger shows up and says, I want to move Mike's money, they're like, hold on. We got to send this to Cleveland or to some place to have it checked. Revocable living trusts avoid that problem and that delay because the law, frankly, is different. They treat trusts like companies. It's up to the company to decide who has signature authority. They don't look into that. They just want to know, do I have a good signature card? But under the old-fashioned law of powers of attorney, they're responsible for every dollar they pay. And if they pay by mistake, they're liable. And that's not why they're in business. They are in business to make money, not pay for for mistakes that are made. We help all of our clients retitle their assets, and unusual for many firms, clients who do planning with us are actually clients for a whole year. We call it our concierge care plan. It means you've got unlimited access to us by telephone and email. You'll do an annual review with a partner at the end of the year. And we keep your documents up to date. Every one document each year, powers of attorney, advanced medical directives, restate the trust. So every 3 years they stay current. Clients don't have to stay in that plan, but the first year is complimentary. Okay, so let's talk real fast about those 3 levels. Some folks will come to me and say, Rory, I have a limited budget, or the thing that keeps me awake at night is that I've worked the family farm. We don't have a lot of this in Fairfax County, but one county west, we have more of it. I owe it to my nieces and nephews to make sure that if I have an accident, the family doesn't lose the family homestead. We can create a trust that's specifically designed to protect that one special piece of real estate. The rest of the fundamental planning comes along with it. And the cost is a good bit less than 1 month in a nursing home, but it absolutely makes that asset off the table in terms of creditors. Doesn't have to be sold or taken by the state or or any nursing home or caregiver. Most of our clients hire us for something called protect everything. They say, oh no, I got much more than the house. I want my retirement accounts protected. Maybe I have that second home. I've got cars that I want to have protected, investment accounts, bank accounts. I own a couple of shares of stock that I inherited from my grandmother. I need all of that stuff protected. Again, so we have a different strategy plan that protect more than just the home, all of those other assets as well. It also includes all of the fundamental things. That is, again, less than 1 month of nursing home here in Northern Virginia. It's not inexpensive by any stretch of the imagination. But what I'd like you to think about is the client we got 2 weeks ago who's at a place called Woodbine here in Fairfax, $27,000 a month because he's intubated. 15,000 is not an unusual number at all for a single month. And then on the first of next month, you got to come in with another check every month until your loved one dies. Last thing to talk about is a level called Protect Everyone. Some folks will come in and say, Roy, that's all great. I do want to protect my assets. I do want to have a plan that protects my family. But you know what keeps me awake at 3 o'clock in the morning? It's my daughter's future ex-husband. I do all of this, protect all his money, die, she inherits it, and the next day he walks out the door, files for divorce, and makes a claim on her inheritance. Is there something you can do to help make sure that that money stays with my daughter and doesn't go down another line? And the answer, of course, is yeah, there is. Just like I protect money for an unborn disabled child with Down syndrome who may not even be born for 5 years, I can certainly anticipate a marriage and make sure that daughter has control of her assets, but it does not become a marital asset and doesn't go into the divorce court with her. That's a whole nother generation of planning, so it is more expensive. That's about 5,000 more than the Protect Everything. But what we're trying to do is offer a range of services to help meet people where their particular needs are. We also help people do applications. Bob and Jean needed, and you apply for your Medicaid benefits, and then you need them. They take money from you, whether you ask it or not, from your paycheck, and then you file to make sure to meet that rule about not having given your stuff away and having less than $2,000. So with Bob and Jean, for example, they had some questions. How did Bob go from $5 million to $2,000 in 3 weeks? So Jean would rather be at the nursing home taking care with the care team on her husband. We pulled together all the information to demonstrate that the planning had been done in accordance with the law. The way we help our clients figure out what is the right level for them is something called a right fit meeting. We really appreciate being invited here. Anybody who would like to come talk to us about that, you can have a meeting that's complimentary. Liz does those meetings for us. She is not a lawyer, but she is our client services director and our practice manager. She knows our processes. Here's the thing. There's a document that somebody is going to load up called the Right Fit Meeting Packet. If you're interested in talking to us, give Liz a call to set an appointment or send her an email and fill out that Right Fit Meeting Packet. And here's what happens. Liz brings that to me, and she and I meet every single client, not a paralegal, not an associate. I meet on every single one. And what we do is we do that smart analysis and decide, based on the priorities that you give us about your family, we'll say, this is the right fit for you. Protect everyone, protect everything, protect home. Okay, so all right, 10 minutes over, which is remarkably good. And if I take 2 minutes for the prayer, I'm only 8 minutes over.
Couple of other things.
So Liz would like me to add a couple of other things.
You also have the opportunity to meet with Rory. But if anybody knows anything about lawyers, time is money. So because you have participated in person or online with this presentation this evening, his fee for a consultation is discounted and you get a $250 discount. And you can meet with Rory and get into the weeds. If you want to know accountants, other lawyers, engineers, they like getting into the weeds. They like knowing how it works and why it works and what do you have to do to make it work. And that is more of his wheelhouse. It's absolutely his wheelhouse, but he does charge $750 for a consultation.
And in the end, the advice is the same. The recommendation
For
is the
those
same.
of you that
Here, from my lips or hers.
For those of you that are here tonight, if you would like to come in for a consultation, I do have the Right Fit meeting packet that Rory mentioned that you can also download if you are viewing us online. And then lastly, two more things actually. The prices that Rory quoted are for a married couple. It's not per person. It is
Well, it's for a single person or a married
person
couple.
or a married couple. It is a one-time fee. The other thing is that if you come in to see us, and we hope that you do, a married couple, you both need to come in to meet with us.
Because of legal ethics. I can't plan for somebody's assets without their consent and approval. You might be a little annoyed if you came home and found that your spouse was all the money and stuffed it in there. No trust. So gotta make sure everybody's on the same sheet of music. Okay, so thanks for your indulgence and thank you, Liz, for covering a couple of the bases that I missed. Do we have any questions coming in?
There's a sheet about Medicaid, and again, anybody can write and ask, and I'm happy to send those. Some stuff about our care coordinating company, Rory's card, my card up there, so. We
So
have,
does the $16,000 plan include the two preceding elements?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Everything in a fundamental plan, the powers of attorney, the advancement of directive, the revocable living trust, it certainly covers the home. And it certainly protects your assets. I describe it this way. It's like a book with 3 chapters. The first chapter is what are the rules when you're alive? It's all about you. Chapter 2 is what do we do when you're deceased? Chapter 3 and protect everything stops there. We give the money to the people who want to go to. It can be a church, it can be your kids, it can be the Smithsonian. It's your choice. Protect everyone is a 3rd chapter that says that money that is coming to my kids that's dealt with for another generation. I don't really do a lot of encouraging this, but we got a new law in Virginia that went into effect a couple of months ago. I can plan for your family for 1,000 years. That's more than most people want, but I can reach into the future and protect those. I know 1,000 years, crazy. Okay, so you had a question.
Okay, this was a question that came in regarding long-term care policy. This is someone who's had a policy for about 15 years. And they're interested if they believe that they paid in more than they think they'll ever use. Should they be dropping this policy?
Okay, so a couple of things about that. Many of the well, first of all, you have to look at your exact policy because there is a variation between them. Typically, this question comes to me when someone gets a notice that their premium is going up next year. The average request by an insurance company is over 50% each year. The average approval, it has to be approved by the state, is above 30%. The worst I've ever seen is an actual approval of 120% in 1 year. It was John Hancock policy, which is a pretty good policy.
I got one of them.
Yeah. They are one of those companies who are no longer in the 5, but we're in the 200. You cannot buy a long-term care insurance policy from John Hancock anymore, which concerns me as a consumer because one of the reasons you give good service to clients is so that other people will buy policies. But if you're not selling more policies, it makes me worry, are they that concerned about your customer service? But be that as it may, when the time comes and they send out that notice for renewal, typically what they'll do, the law says they have to give you some options. If you're the widow who spent her last mite, they can't force you to give up your policy by raising your premiums because that's all they would do. They would just take all the old people, raise their premiums until they quit. So they have to offer you a choice. You can either keep your old premium and keep lower benefits, or you can keep your benefits and pay a higher premium. And many of them will offer a cash out policy. Don't cancel your policy. Don't pay any more. And because you've paid in $123,000, we will pay for $123,000 of care. That's actually not a bad deal because they've had your $123,000 to invest for 15 years. Right? So they're still technically ahead of the game, but they're not on the hook for the whole 300,000. Without getting too far into the weeds, you're going to be surprised. We typically suggest a nuanced approach with that. If you're doing a proactive plan and you'd like to switch to the unlimited ABD benefit, the least expensive and easiest strategy is to establish that trust and deal with something called the look back period. So sometimes we'll suggest to people that they keep their long-term care insurance for 3 years or so, that through that look back period, and then cancel it. And many of those times we'll say, don't increase your premiums, just keep, because it's a Band-Aid anyway. Keep the current Band-Aid. In 3 years, it's not going to be that much different anyway. That way you can keep your cost moderated. This is a part of what we do in the counseling process, is look at everybody's policy individually and give you a recommendation based on the outcomes that you want. So I can't tell you over a Zoom whether you should cancel it or not. What I should tell you is you should consider it, especially if you put in another element like this kind of planning into your plan. If you're 93 and you've still got that policy, you should probably keep it. If you're 68 and you've got that policy, they're probably far more economical. That policy that I told you that came up 123% increase, my plan for everything, including an estate plan, is $12,000. If he paid that premium increase, his premium was going to be over $12,000 for 1 year of coverage. So you got to get into the numbers. Typically, the government policies are a little bit more economical because they were sold to a larger pool. You just got to look at the policies. So, sorry.
Okay, second, there was a question about the veterans benefit premium.
The benefit, you mean the payout?
I believe so.
Okay, you want me to show that slide again? Is that?
Yes, I think there was.
And did you say these slides would be available? Is that
I'm
something?
gonna fix them. I will be glad to. Yeah, absolutely. And you've got it all recorded. They're out there anyway, so I'll be glad to do it. All right, so let's see. I lost my
Slides order.
there. That for some reason my clicker wasn't working. So let me go up. So it's about $3,700 for a veteran married to a veteran, both of whom need care. The definition of needing care is your doctor, not the VA doctor, says you need help to be safe. You could actually still be working. You could be driving your car and need help to be safe. Okay, we should be coming right up here. Oh, and a mom, brother, there we go. So here are those rates. 36.49 for a veteran and a veteran with a spouse, 27 or 33,000 a year, a veteran only about $28,000 a year, and spouse alone, never served. Also, there's a lot of details in this, but there are 5 pages of jobs that people have done to help defend America in time of war. And it's not just Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, Space Force. An interesting case that Liz and I had just as COVID came in was a woman, the only uniform she ever wore was she was a stewardess for Pan Am, that's what they called them in those days, in 1945, flying into Berlin, because they were afraid if she got shot down, the Ruskies might do something, so they wanted her treated, they wanted everyone like that, treated as a prisoner of war under the Geneva Convention. So on the list is things like merchant marines, stewardesses for Pan Am, people who repaired lighthouses. So if anybody has done anything to help protect the country during a time of war, it's worth looking into it. I'll leave that up so people can see it. Yes, sir.
I'm really puzzled by this, ABD medical long-term care insurance benefits.
You're not the first,
Never heard of it before.
right?
We're not the first.
That's why I do this.
I have to believe that there are a lot of limitations on its use because it seems like everyone would want to take advantage of it, and well, I haven't done it either. I've paid a lot of attention to stuff in the last 5 years. So what are the limitations on using it?
Or how do you apply for it? 'Cause I think my mother should get this. She has no money and needs to go into assisted living, and she's just gonna be a charity patient.
So the first thing to know is it pays for what the government considers long-term care. Assisted living facilities are regulated facilities and they are not regulated at the level of long-term care. Many facilities offer more coverage, but if there's a snowstorm, it's okay for the assisted living to just have a couple of days. It may not be good salesmanship or good marketing, but if you're at a nursing home and there's a snowstorm, they're not going home. You know, they must absolutely provide 24/7 coverage. Because the companies that provide care at home are regulated in the same way, some people find this interesting. Wait a second, they'll pay for home care and they'll pay for nursing home, but they won't pay much for assisted living. It really depends. There are programs by assisted living depending on where your mom is. If she is downstate in Virginia or in the western part of the United States.
Suburbs.
Philly. Okay, so the question is, there is a program called, they call it the auxiliary grant. I'm not in Pennsylvania, so I have no idea. But here in Northern Virginia, those auxiliary grant beds are as rare as hen's teeth. South of Charlottesville, you can find one. The problem is when the nursing home makes the deal to accept the discount for volume. In the assisted living facility, they can say, we'll give you 2 beds, we'll give you 3 beds. And if that's the facility you need to be in, you have to wait for somebody to move out or die to get that bed. If you come into a nursing home from the hospital, nobody cares whether they want to have 50% private pay and 50% Medicaid. If you need it, you have a right to elect it. They cannot discriminate against you. So a question for your mom would be, very simply, this is very truncated. If she has so many resources and we think she could outlive her resources, maybe what we do is,
She has no resources. I have to pay her rent.
oh, you do?
Yeah, and she's in rehab right now. She was in the hospital this past week and she just went to rehab this week over the.
You need to talk to somebody immediate. She would have the right to stay from rehab probably in that facility as long-term care, and she could go automatically onto Medicaid. If you're telling me the truth, that she really doesn't have anything.
Yeah, she just, she lives,
She may not like.
her social security and pension is not enough to make her rent payment. I have to subsidize it.
Yeah,
I'm also paying her gas and electric.
and if she's been in the hospital, she may have a need. And what I would hate to see is you go paying for her, and in 3 months, she has to move up to a higher level of care anyway. Nobody wants to, my dad called it God's waiting room. I get it. Nobody wants to go to a nursing home, but we don't live isolated, right? We're all God's creatures on this planet together. And you're using money that you would otherwise use for your dignity and independence. So you're doing exactly what this plan is designed to prevent. You're spending money that you could either enjoy or use for your own care to help backfill her heart. So I'm not telling you need to tell her she needs to go to a nursing home. What I'm saying is you need to step back and look at the whole picture. Do you have kids with special needs that we need to protect? Do you have a spouse who we need to worry about? Do you have terminal pancreatic cancer and you'd love to spend the money on your mom? Do we worry that mom's condition is going to continue for a number of years? I often say to people, and these are very powerful tools, but in the end, we're dealing with people with disabilities, and I can't fix those. I can keep people from going broke, but only God can cure cancer, right? And so sometimes what we're looking at is the least bad lifetime situation. It's the best financial situation, but I get that we've got to balance all of those things. And that's why I emphasize the fact that I've been through that journey. I sometimes say that it's more art than science. You have to look at the resources that you have, and it's not just ABD and your pension. It's family resources, right? You know, the 85-year-old woman who has 4 children who live in the same county and 20 grandchildren who come and visit, she can't get a day in without a visit, is different than the dad whose daughter lives in Oregon and she can come visit once a year.
Cindy,
So
I have your contact information here. If you'd like, I can reach out to you and provide you with some names of elder law attorneys in Pennsylvania.
Okay, that would be
I
great.
have a fellow we work in Philly, very, very, very good. All right, so your question was about limitation.
yeah, so this is not the case that this would apply to people who are simply old and poor, that people have to have some significant physical, disability to apply for it.
Great, so that is in practice the limitation. Just because you're at 65, they're not gonna mail you a check for, the Northern Virginia number is $9,268, that's what the Virginian gets. If your mom is there, that's exactly what they pay, not a penny more. And Virginia takes it happily, because every bed is full, right? Okay, but we can't go live at the Virginia. We have to be medically eligible. So real fast, this is where those activities of daily living come in. I'll give you the shorthand version so that we don't run too long. There's an acronym. It's horrible, but it does help you remember it. It's death with 2 T's. Do you need help, human help, with D is dressing. Can you button your own buttons, zip your own zippers, tie your own shoes? If you wear slip-on shoes and a sweatsuit, I know you've lost that ADL because you're accommodating, right? If you wear 6 sweaters in August and a white beater t-shirt in February, that could be a cognitive decline that's associated with a dressing problem. So D is dressing, E is eating. At its most base level, do you need help actually getting the fork to your mouth? For my dad, it was, he would sit on the porch until midnight. He just didn't feel hungry. And someone had to come out and say, Dale, it's time for dinner. You got to come in and eat. Food choices. So the person who eats nothing but Twinkies, no, that's not healthy. If you need someone to buy the food for you, cook the food for you, cut it up for you so that you can eat it, and make sure that you're eating appropriately and at the right times, that gets us into that category. A is ambulation. Very often the first one that goes. It doesn't mean that using a cane or a walker makes you eligible, because it doesn't. That's not human health. Typically, where we see this one checked off the box is going up and down stairs safely. If your doctor says you should have somebody not even holding you, but walking a step behind just in case you might catch your heel, you've lost ambulation. Okay. First T is transferring, usually the last one to go. Do you need human help to get up and out of bed and into your wheelchair, or up and out of your wheelchair to go into the bathroom? But that certainly is a problem if you are that way. The next T is toileting. It's easy for me to just say the way I described it with my mom. If I took my mom to the bathroom, and she went in and we closed the door, and when she went in, her panties were up and her skirt was down, and she does her business on her own in a reasonable period of time, and she comes out and her panties are up and her skirt is down and the bathroom is clean, she doesn't need help. But if she needs help, any of those things, getting into the bathroom, getting onto the toilet, putting her clothes back on, keeping herself clean, or making sure the bathroom is clean for the next person who comes, then we have a loss of toileting. And then the H in death is hygiene. 2 prongs there. The first is basically bathing. It could be a cognitive decline. I don't think I need a bath. Mom, when's the last time you had a bath? I don't need a bath. You need a bath. No, I don't. Lots of reasons. It's cumbersome. I forgot. I don't smell that I have a problem. I'm afraid I'm going to trip over the edge of the tub when I get in. So if you need help physically to bathe, that's a problem. If you don't remember to bathe, that could qualify. And a second prong, different prong, either one can work alone, particularly incontinence. My dad didn't always get the call from Mother Nature in time to get up in the middle of the night and make it to the bathroom to do his business. So he wore pull-ups late in his life. It helped to clean yourself up after that, even though he was relatively functional, but he had an incontinence problem, and to make sure that he didn't get UTIs and have infections and all that stuff, he needed human help. So if you've lost 2 of those 6 ADLs, then you're medically eligible. That's the point at which you could go into a nursing home.
EDLs are also a criteria for using your long-term care insurance with most policies now.
Well, that's interesting.
Loss of.
So the person who was talking about their long-term care insurance policy, so they have changed the policies over time. that ambulation, they've taken the H and broken it into two. Okay, there are very few people in my experience who are not both at the same time incontinent and have trouble with bathing. They're almost automatically the same. The long-term care insurance policies, I can't remember the last time I read one that was different. We broke that into two different prongs to keep it six, and they eliminated the first one that almost everybody has, the ambulation. Do you know you could be wheelchair bound, unable to stand up? And most long-term care insurance policies will say it has nothing to do with whether, okay, it's scurrilous.
I want to thank you for your time. We're at over an hour and a half now. But these have been great questions. I just want to make sure that those who are on Zoom feel free to ring off if it's time for them to do so. And I want to be mindful of your time as well. Any other closing remarks that you want to make?
No, except to thank you very much. This is a passion of mine. Spreading this word, the reaction that we got here is very, very typical. How could I not know about this? And it's a combination of people thinking it's a poverty program, they're ashamed. They don't know,
But they
but
don't know.
whatever. But that's why we're here.
Thank you so much
Thanks
for
for
coming
asking.
out and for
My
putting
pleasure.
on a wonderful presentation and for making yourself available as a resource. We're so grateful.
I do appreciate that it was a bit like turning on a fire hose. It ordinarily takes me at least an hour and a half to do the presentation before I get to questions. So you get points for keeping up with the hash feed. Well, I don't know. I may have lost everybody in the web. But if you have questions or you'd like information, you can absolutely get it and, no cost. Let us know if we can help. Thank you so much for letting us.
Thank you, Beth. Let's hear it for Lori.
Oh, you a doctor, lawyer, great.
Well, my mother's gonna be 92 in 7 days, and she fits all 6 of these on this
Wow.
list.